Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn entitled Building Dashboards with Dashboard Studio. We appreciate your time today, and we are hoping that you will come away with additional tools that will assist you in your day-to-day work in Splunk. I'm going to deliver today's session. I'm a Splunk architect and senior member of the customer experience team that delivers Splunk expertise on demand to our customers, and we support our Atlas product, which helps you get the most out of Splunk. As always, if you have any questions along the way, please post them in chat and we'll get to them. But for now, I can go ahead and start over on my PowerPoint here. So like I mentioned, today's topic is building dashboards with Dashboard Studio. So my goal today is to get you comfortable with using Dashboard Studio, the differences between classic dashboards and Dashboard Studio, and how to kind of start your process of making dashboards in Dashboard Studio and getting more comfortable with it. So let's go ahead and go to what is Dashboard Studio. So within Splunk, popular and a pretty common thing to do is build dashboards, essentially a collection of searches to present your data however you want it to be presented. Before Dashboard Studio, what we consider classic dashboards were the way to do that within Splunk. But starting in version 8.2, Splunk introduced Dashboard Studio. It has JSON formatting on the back end compared to XML of classic dashboards. It's something that Splunk continues to support and add new features. They're continually adding with new versions, making it more robust and more feature-rich. And Dashboard Studio in particular allows for greater customization and flexibility out of the box than classic dashboards. So some of the differences between classic dashboards and Dashboard Studio, like I said, XML versus JSON based. Currently, classic dashboards does support third-party visualizations, while Dashboard Studio does not. Dashboard Studio, you can add shapes, lines, icons, text boxes, and images, all which you cannot do in classic dashboards. Supports single value icons, supports limited trellis visualizations. You can choose between two layouts in Dashboard Studio, Absolute and Grid, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And you can export in both PDF and PNG format of your dashboards. Versus classic dashboards, you can only export in PDF format. This is not the full comprehensive list of differences, but I just wanted to list a handful. So how can you make a Dashboard Studio dashboard? You can find it by making any way you want to make a dashboard, whether you click on the dashboard tab, choose a search and add it to a dashboard, but you'll have the choice here. Anytime you make one, you'll see you can choose between classic dashboards and Dashboard Studio. If you select Dashboard Studio, you can then see absolute versus grid layout. And so absolute versus grid layout, as you might imagine by the name, grid is kind of more closely to that classic dashboard feel of the dashboard panels have to be lined up one by one or on top of each other, and it's that more rigid grid-like formatting. Whereas Absolute, you can move your visualizations about your canvas freely and really create things that are very interesting and much more visually dynamic than classic dashboards. And so we're going to look at a couple of the things in the UI of the Dashboard Studio before we hop over into a demo. So you can see we have the editing toolbar, looks different than classic dashboards. We're able to add charts or visualizations, inputs, icons, shapes, images, things that you cannot do with classic dashboards. Markdown text. We have our configuration panel, data overview, and source code editor. And we'll be looking at all of these things. And so this is the configuration panel. So as you can see, the little gearbox here. This is the actual configuration of the canvas of the dashboard itself. We can change height, width, background color, put a background image, a number of different options there. We have a number of different chart selections or visualization selections. And again, third-party visualizations, so those that you download from Splunk Base, other places are not available to use in Dashboard Studio currently. I can't speak on behalf of Splunk, but it may be something, since it's available in classic dashboards, that may be added in the future. And so when we create a visualization in the Splunk Dashboard Studio, there's a couple different ways we can do it. The first way is create the search first and then associate it with the visualization. So here we would click on Data Overview, we create our search, enter in our SPL, and etc. And then we would add a visualization, and we would select that data source, and it would automatically run that data or that visualization and the data behind it. The second method is that we select a visualization and a new data source will open, and you can enter in the SPL that way. It'll make a little bit more sense in our demo here in just a moment. One helpful hint that I'll show you in the demo as well is that the visualizations and really everything you do within Dashboard Studio is going to be given a name. Visualizations start with viz, searches start with ds for data source, and by default, it's going to be a random value of characters. If you are really getting into Dashboard Studio, and I do see a question in chat there. Is the recording? Yes, after this session, if you anyone who has attended the session or signed up for the session will automatically get a recording sent to you in your email. So look forward to that after the meeting or after the session is over. Back to the visualization, everything's going to be given a name with random characters. If you get into the backend editing and really trying to change things and see how your dashboard's set up, I definitely recommend giving things specific names with their IDs. Whereas this visualization, instead of X1, 2, etc., I would say visualization sales count bar, so that I know that if I'm in the back end and I see sales count bar, I know exactly what it's looking for or what it's replying to, more than just a random collection of numbers. And again, in our demo, we will go over that as well. So chain searches are something that are unique to Dashboard Studio. In classic dashboards, you can kind of think of this as base searches, but being able to use that in the GUI. Whereas classic dashboards, base searches are certainly usable and recommended, but you have to set those up in the source code. In Dashboard Studio, you can set that up in the GUI. So essentially, you can create your search, you create a chain search, and you can select any of your other searches as a parent search and add to that. Dashboard Studio exclusive ability is to add icons and shapes. Let me take a sip of water. It's to add icon and shapes. And with that, not only can you add those, you can tie those to searches. And so you can kind of dynamically set up searches tied to these icons for a really quick visualization of search value. I'll show you a little bit of that in the demo, but it's something that's exclusive to Dashboard Studio. And something else we're going to talk about is setting tokens. There's a couple different ways we can set tokens within Dashboard Studio. As this is a bit of a beginner's guide, we're just going to focus on click values. And so we'll be able to add interactions, and we're able to set tokens that way. And we can use that throughout our dashboard, which I will show in the demo. And not only can we do that with our searches, we can also do that with our inputs as well. So you can think of that as your drop-down menus in your dashboards, things that are common, or things that are pretty common in classic dashboards as well. We can replicate that here. Then finally, we'll touch a bit on source code editing. So this is a way that you can make things behave a little bit differently than what you can set in the GUI. There's a number of different ways you can do that, but we're really going to kind of scratch the surface of this and show you kind of the formatting of the backend. And before I hop over to the demo, like I said, Dashboard Studio is constantly being updated with features to make it closer to have that parity with classic dashboards, along with expanding what it can do beyond what you could do with classic dashboards. So as you can see, some new things that were even in Splunk 9.3, scheduling PDF and PNG exports of dashboards, changing the text colors of tiles and descriptions, etc. So they are definitely constantly adding to this. I gave a similar lunch and learn to this one, I think about a year ago. And there's been a number of different things that have been added since then. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's pretty robust now, but if there's some features that you would like, it may be added in the near future. You never know. So if we go ahead and hop over to my Splunk here, let me zoom in once or twice, make it a little bit bigger for you. In here, we're going to go ahead and jump over to dashboards. And you can see we can click create a new dashboard here. And so we have our dashboard option. We can give it a title. We're going to call this Lunch and Learn Dashboard. We can give it the option if we want, change the permissions, but the most important part is we're going to choose Dashboard Studio. And again, Absolute gives us full layout control. And Grid is for that quick organization, similar to classic dashboards where things kind of click into place, either beside each other or atop of each other. But we're going to go ahead and choose Absolute because that's where the real fun of Dashboard Studio lies. We're going to go ahead and click Create. It's going to open up our dashboard here in just a moment. And as you can see, we have our dashboard. We have the bar that we looked at in the PowerPoint. So we have our visualizations, our inputs, so drop-down, multi-select, text, number, time range. We have our icons, so we can add any of these icons. And we can also add our own icons if they're an SVG file. Any icon that you might have that's custom, you can add that here. We have our shapes, so ellipse, rectangles, and lines. We can add an image, which I don't have one, but we could add an image there. We can add markdown text. We have our configuration panel. We have our data source overview, and then we have our source code. So since I went ahead and added a markdown text here, we can go ahead and add a text box, something exclusive to Dashboard Studio. We could say, welcome to the dashboard. And you can see very small, but we can go ahead and change that, make it a little bit better for us. So if we open up color and style, you can see we can change our font, we can change our background, font family, default size. We can change it up to extra large, but if that is not enough for us, we want custom. Let's just say we want 100. And there we go. We have a large welcome to dashboard. If we want to make it a background color, we can. I'm going to go ahead and leave it transparent. Change the font color. We can. Let's go ahead and make that purple. Again, something you can only do easily in Dashboard Studio. But you can see anytime we click out of one of the visualizations or objects on our dashboard, it automatically brings up the canvas configuration page. So you can see here, we can have a display mode, canvas width and height, background color. So if we want to give it a nice background color, we can. Let's give it a nice gray. We can enter in a background image. We can add a submit button and a number of different options there as well. All right, and so we have a couple of different things here on our dashboard already. It comes with a global time range picker. We're just going to leave that as it is now. But actually, the data that we're going to be working with, this is just my test machine. So the data that I have, I'll just need to search all time. So we can click this, we'll reload. And now it will be default all time because I made that default value all time there. And as you can see here, what I mentioned earlier, if I close these things out, everything that I add to the dashboard will have this source code section. So the global time range picker will have the source code section. This markdown text will have the source code section. Any kind of drop down, any kind of visualization I add, any kind of icon I add, those will all have this source code section. And within that, we have the ID. And that's what I was talking about, where it just enters in a random value. So if I was looking at the back end, the source code, you can see I have a visualization here, and that's the visualization name. And if I had 15 visualizations or visualization objects, you can tell that would get a little confusing pretty quickly. So if I want to go ahead and just do this viz title, give it a nice name, and then if I went to the source code, I could say viz title. Oh, I know this is the title. This is where I set my welcome to the dashboard message. So I'm going to do that throughout everything that I add to the dashboard. But the first thing I'm going to add is going to be a table. So you can see when I added a table, it gives me the select data source. And so I can create a search from here. I can give it a name. It's going to call search base. Under here, it says one visualization will be updated. After that goes away, I'll be able to change the data source ID. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste my search here. So I'm just going to be looking through some demo data, and then I'm going to stats, and I'm going to count out by category ID. And by default, I want to use the global time range and earliest and latest, which is going to be this global time range picker. But if I wanted to change that, I could. But we have our data source ID here now. I want to go ahead and say this is my base search. And so if I'm editing the source code, I know if I see DS base search, I have that idea of exactly what it's being used for. So let's go ahead and click apply and close. And we have our visualization there. And again, thanks to Dashboard Studio, I can make it long, I can make it short, I can make it tall, and I can move it around wherever I want. If I wanted to cover things up, I could. I'm going to go ahead and just make it look a little like this. And so we have a number of different options that we can do. So when I click into this visualization, it opens up the configuration for this visualization. I can change the type from here if I want to. I can change the title. So I can just call it base search, description, base data. You can see we have a description and title there. We have a visibility. So if we have an element that if there's data unavailable, we don't want to see it, we can easily make that just a button click easy. We can choose our position and size. We can choose the way that the data is displayed. We want to add row numbers, the number of rows that we want to display, etc. Oops, let me go ahead and close that. And then we can give it a color and style. So if we want to make the background a different color, we can. So let's give it a nice bluish color. We can alternate row colors or not. We can even change the font, and we can change the font size. So if we want to make it a little bit bigger, we can. And then we have our interactions, which is kind of how we're going to set our tokens here in a minute, but I'll get to that in just a little bit. So we went ahead and set up our first visualization, set some options on it, made it look a little bit different, things that we couldn't do before. I guess one thing, if I didn't want a background color, I can also make this transparent, and it kind of blends in with the background there. But I kind of like that color. I'm going to go ahead and leave it. All right. And so one thing I can do here that we can only do in Dashboard Studio is add icons. So let's go ahead and add this person icon. And as you can see right now, just a nice icon, doesn't have any color, doesn't have anything associated with it. But one thing we can do is set up data sources. So if I add this icon and click set up primary data source, I'm going to go ahead and create a chain search. So I can click create a chain search. I choose a parent search, which is going to be search base. It'll give me the SPL of that parent search. And so let's say I only want to see the data for category ID equals arcade. So I can apply and close that. And I misspelled search there. There we go. I can apply and close that, and it does nothing. But I can make it do something. So if I want to change the dynamic elements, I can. So I want to go ahead and say here, I'm going to choose the dynamic elements. I'm going to choose major value. And I'm going to say, and actually, I needed to choose icon. I was wrong. Icon for the icons. Guess that makes sense. So I can change the values here. I just want to make this a green, yellow, red. So if it's sold 300 or greater, it's green. If it's sold 150 to 300, it's yellow. If it's less than 150, it's red. And we can see very quickly and easily that this is green. So I know that this is green, so that I know that Arcade has sold at least 300. And you can see these values are pretty high, so let's just change this to 3,000 and 1,500. And when I change that, now it's yellow. And so I can associate icons with data, and they can dynamically change as the data does. So say I had an icon for each of these individual category IDs, and I knew what those icons meant, I could easily look and say, oh, this one's yellow, green, 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 red, green, green. So just a way to easily associate and make data work kind of for you in ways that only Dashboard Studio can do with these icons. So what I can do now is we're going to look at setting tokens and how to do that within Dashboard Studio. So there's a couple different ways we can do it. First, we are going to look on how to do it from the search itself. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my base search visualization. I'm going to close some of these things down here, and we're going to go under interactions. So if we open up interactions, we have the appropriate add interaction button. And you can see now we have something we can do on click. So here, I can choose no action. I can link to a custom URL. I can set tokens. I can link to a dashboard, a report, or a search. For now, since we're just kind of doing a beginning to Dashboard Studio, we're just going to look at setting tokens. And so we're going to set a token here. We're going to give it the token name of, let's call it category, because we want to make it where if we click one of these category IDs, then we change our token to that category ID value. So then the token value, we could choose the name, so the field name of the value or location clicked, the value of the location clicked, or the value in the specific series corresponding to the location clicked. So the field name that I choose is going to be category ID dot value. And again, I can choose a default value if I want. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as nothing. We're going to click apply. And one thing that I don't know if you caught it that I didn't do was set up a custom ID for this visualization and my searches. So we're just going to say viz icon before we jump back into our tokens. And then if we go to the data overview page, even the searches here, we had our base search, which we set, but I did not set one for the chain search. Chain one is what I'm going to call it. And so now it's a little bit easier at the back end. But now back to our tokens. We have our interaction. We have our set tokens. And so if we save this in view, you see we can now choose one of these, and it does nothing yet because we have not set up anything that will actually use the token. And so let's go ahead and do that.
Excuse me, Eric?
Yeah.
We do have another question. Robert asked if you could explain chain search again.
Yes, definitely. All right, we'll jump to back to tokens in just a minute. But chain searches, you can kind of think of as base searches and child searches under that. So whenever we create a search, we're going to go ahead and create it up here. So here we have index equals tutorial. We give it an index source type, and then we're doing a stats count by category ID. So that is our search. But say I wanted to create a search for one specific visualization that uses the results of that search, but doesn't have to run that entire search again, just to save resources. In that case, I can create a chain search, which I did here, and I give it a parent search. So in this case, we used our only other search that we have. We can see this is the base. So this is the SPL of that search underscore base. We give it a stats count by category ID. And instead of having to do all of this over again, we take the results of this search that's already been run for a different search or for a different visualization, and we search those results. And so I pipe to a category ID equals arcade. So it'll specifically give us the results of arcade and 2745. If I were to change this to sports and apply and close, you can see it changes that because we changed the chain search itself. So it's basically kind of using the results of a search that you've already run and just searching those results. It helps save time and resources in your dashboard. So definitely if you're using a similar search over and over and you're kind of just changing the results of that search, look to using chain searches to help your dashboards be more performant. But definitely let me know if you need any more explanation on that. Perfect. Great. So we will hop back over to tokens here. And so we have our interaction set up where if we click this, it will set our token. But again, right now we do not have anything that's using the token. But let's go ahead and say we want this visualization here, so this icon, to use that token. So we want to make this dynamic, so it'll change values based off of which one we choose. So we go back into that base search, or that chain search, I should say, and under category ID, instead of giving it an explicit value, we can use the standard format for tokens within Splunk, which is $value $. So within $2, I'm going to give it the name of the token that we set. And so we set that token name as category. So if we want to use that token, we can do category ID equals $category $. So if we apply and close that, and we view our dashboard and select these, since I have it where it's 3,000 and above is green, 1,500 to 3,000 is yellow, 1,500 and above below is red. As you can see, as we click this, it's yellow. If we click sports where it's 793, it should go red. And if we select strategy where it's over 3,000, it should go green. And so it's using that token. And we can actually even open up, if we hover over the icon itself, we can open it up in search. And in the search, you can see the category ID is strategy because that is the last token that we set. Where if we selected arcade and opened that search, you can see the category ID will be arcade. And so we're using that token dynamically with a icon, and again, something only able to do in Dashboard Studio itself. All right. And so let's just go ahead and we'll just use a line chart here just to show a different type of visualization. We're just going to go ahead and use this same search because you can use the same search multiple times in a row, but actually this is not the best search for it. So we're going to set up the search. It's not going to be the most performant just because of the way it's written, but my search is going to be performant just because it's a small test environment. So here, similar search to that base search, but we're going to use the token set from here in our time chart, and then we're going to do a count by action so we can see the actions over time for these different category IDs. So if we go ahead and click apply and close, you can see over time we have our values there. And again, test data, so it all drops off after I upload this data. But we can see that there, so I can actually change here if I wanted to set up a different time range. So we can see we have June and July. So we're going to do between the 1st of June and the last of July, but just for this chart. So if we click apply and close, save that, and as we can see now, our time range has changed and we have different values there. So if we choose simulation, it's going to change that, or rather sports. So you can see we changed there. One other things we can do with tokens is we can also use them in titles and descriptions. So if we want to do time chart for category, and so this will be a title for this time chart here, and we're going to use the value of category. So as you can see, now it says time chart for sports, time chart for arcade, time chart for accessories. So we can really dynamically change the look of our dashboard in accordance with tokens as well. And again, this visualization, like the rest of them, we have a lot of different options for data display. If we want to do color and style, so if I wanted to make this a transparent background, I could. If I wanted to display the values, I could. Just the min and max, I could. So you can do a number of different ways. You can do series colors. So you can really even line width, I should say. So if you want to make them nice, thick lines, you can. If you want to make them nice and skinny, you can. Just a lot more customization than classic dashboards in a much easier way. Classic dashboards, don't get me wrong, very flexible, but very back-end based in terms of editing the source code to do a lot of this stuff. That is just button click easy in Dashboard Studio. And so if we hop on over to the second way to set tokens that we're going to look at today, and that is going to be using input, specifically the dropdown. So to do this, I'm actually going to take the token away from this base search because I want to do it from the dropdown instead. So again, we have our token name, and from our previous token, we already have set up in these other searches that we want to use the name category. So the token name will be category. We have our static menu configuration if we want. So by default, it'll have all item 1 and item 2. We want to go ahead and drop that to no static. I don't want anything to be static here. I want it to be all dynamic based off a search I'll assign it. So again, no selected default values. And so I will set up a primary data source for this dropdown. And in this case, since I want to get these values, these category ID values, I'm going to go ahead and just use the search base. So I'm going to use the same exact search as this one. Then it'll give me dynamic menu label field options. Because you can see, if I do not have a data source set up, I can only set up static menu configurations. But once I associate this dropdown with a search, now it gives me dynamic menus. And from here, I want my category ID to be the label and the value. And so on here, it'll show you the different fields that search returns, and you can choose those for which label and value you want for your token. And so again, input gives me a random ID. So I'm just going to call this input dropdown. So if I save this and view this now, we can see we now have our options here. See, time chart for sports, changes that as well. Time chart for arcade, changes that as well. Time chart for strategy, changes that as well. And so that is another way that we can set tokens. If we want to mix and match, some of them will be tokens that you set on click. Some of them will be drop-down tokens, etc. We can do that. I just wanted to show the way to set up both of those basic tokens. And so now the last thing we'll look at here is the source code. So I'm going to go ahead and close up everything here, because the source code is laid out in a pretty logical way that makes it pretty easy to understand. And so you're going to have different sections for your source code. You'll have all your visualizations. You'll have all your data sources. You'll have default values. You'll have your inputs, so that drop down that we selected and the time range that came automatically. You'll have your layout, and then you'll have your description and title. And so we can look at these one by one. We can close these all up, make it a little bit more easy to deal with. So let's go ahead and look at visualizations. And as you can see, I didn't give a name to one of these. So you can see we have our viz title and all of its options. We have this one, which is actually our base search table, which I didn't give a name to. So without looking through some of this, I didn't know what it was talking about. We have our icon. Again, we have our values, the dynamic range value, and then again, another visualization I didn't give a name to. And so if we go ahead and close this, visualization ID, I'm just going to call this viz table. And we'll call this viz line chart. Make sure both of those saved, and they did. So now if we go over in visualizations, we can see now it's table, title, icon, and line chart. Much more logical, much more easy to understand what you're looking at if you give things names. As you can see, it shows the visualization, the title, the type, the options. So this is where you can really start customizing. There's a number of different ways you can customize. Definitely worth looking up Splunk Dashboard Studio options, customizing different things. As we can see, our custom font size, etc. We can change that however much we want. And you can see we have a number of different options here as well. So where we changed our background color, this one where we set our dynamic icon so that if it's red, it's to 1500, yellow, and green. And so you can also see the searches that are powering them in there. So let's go ahead and close out visualizations. Or before I do, you can actually close individual visualizations as well. So if I just want to focus on this viz line chart, I can just focus on this viz line chart by closing out everything else and not having to deal with all that clutter. And so that makes it a lot easier, especially since JSON can get a little bit clunky to look at sometimes. So if I go ahead and close out on all of my visualizations here, we'll open up data sources. And so we have our data source base, chain one, and line chart, all easily named. I know exactly what they're talking about. The queries and the parameters. And you can see this one, since it's a chain search, it extends the DS base search right here. And that's the query that extends it. So if we close out our data sources, our defaults, we can set up different defaults if we want. So with our visualization icon, where it has these values in range, if we want to set up a default where this is the default for any kind of dynamic range within this dashboard itself, we could set that up in the defaults so that we don't have to set that up on a visualization by visualization level if we want to use those values for everything. And our inputs here, you can see that's a global time range picker, and then our drop down. So you can see the number of different things there. And those are our inputs that we set up to set our token. And then finally, layout, the type is absolute. It'll give us our height and width and a number of different options for the layout of the visualizations themselves. And then finally, it is our description and title. One thing I wanted to show on the visual or on the source code editing is that it is actually pretty good at letting you know if there's an issue. So as you can see, all these options have to come with a comma afterwards if there's an option after it. But font color, since there's no option after it, does not need a comma. But say I accidentally added a comma, it's going to show me red right here. It's going to say trailing comma. So it knows that there's a trailing comma and there's nothing after it, and you need to remove that to work. And if I try to click apply and close, it's not going to let me. So it's not going to let me save a issue in my source code itself, potentially messing up my dashboard. So it's going to give you that warning, and it's going to make sure that you know it and fix it before it lets you save. And as you can see over here, it shows it as well, so you can get a good idea of where it's at. So it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but on this, where you can kind of see the whole entire dashboard there, it has a red line of where the issue is. So if I go ahead and erase that, the red goes away and everything's good, I can close. And so that is kind of the basics of building a dashboard in Dashboard Studio. And again, this one's not very pretty, but you can really build some crazy, interesting, cool things, especially if you combine images and shapes. And for example, you can do a line here. This is one of the shapes that you can add. You can give it a different thickness. You can give it opacity, a dash style. You can even give it an arrow. So if I wanted to say that this data relates to this, really explicitly call that out, I can. Give it different colors if I want. And again, I can do that also with rectangles and ellipses. If I want to add an image, if I wanted to add my company logo to this upper right hand of this, I could. So it's definitely something that is very interesting. Again, light mode, dark mode. I'm sure some of your eyes are burning from me not using dark mode. But just for the sake of the lunch and learn, I'll use light mode. Those are just some of the things you can do with Dashboard Studio. And one thing I want to point out before we wrap it up is that Splunk knows that you can do some really cool things with Dashboard Studio, and it wants you to know about it. And so if we go to dashboards, you will see the examples for Dashboard Studio. And if we click Visit Example Hub, and this is also something they continually add to, and it is dark mode, so your eyes are a little bit more spared here. You can see a number of different things about dashboards or Dashboard Studio. You can see the different chart elements. You can get a better idea of what the chart elements do, how to use them, source definition, multiple series, and really get an idea of what the source code behind it looks like. So you can do that with all of the different types of visualizations, the inputs, defaults, etc. So you can see if you want to have token defaults, multi-select, drop-down, cascading inputs, just a really, really good place to learn of really how to use Dashboard Studio to its full potential. But the part that I really like, makes me a little bit jealous, to be honest, is the complete dashboards. So this is where they really show you, and obviously they'll probably have some graphic design people working on these as well. But really some of the power that you can use with Dashboard Studio. I like this one as it's fairly basic. It's understandable more than some of these other ones to me. But if I go ahead and click on it, it will show me this example of a dashboard in Dashboard Studio and how dynamic and interesting the data is presented. And pretty much this red or this orange and blue background, that's just an image. That is just an image they put as a background image, and the way that they laid out the data makes it really pop out at you. Like the most important things are here. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Because these are really just visualizations, a background image. And so it can really show you, and again, image, some writing here, visualization. So Splunk includes a great number of example dashboards to kind of spark your creativity, see what all you can do with it. And then it also gives you the full source code. So if there's anything in here that you're confused about, you're not sure how it works, they give you the full source code so you can kind of get an idea, a peek behind the curtain of how it all works. So definitely recommend checking out that dashboard examples hub, not only for the complete dashboards, but just for getting used to all of the different elements of Dashboard Studio in general. But with that, that was covering everything that I wanted to cover with Dashboard Studio. So how to create them, how to add visualizations, how to use visualizations with, or use searches with icons to create dynamic icons, using tokens, setting up tokens through click and through dropdowns, and a little bit of source code editing. But as always, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. So as always, if you have any questions, and at some point this might show up. There we go. If you have any questions, always feel free to contact us at support@kennygroup.com. Any questions you might have before the end of this, just let us know in the chat, and I'll answer anything before you guys leave. Otherwise, thank you for coming today. And as I mentioned, the Lunch and Learn will be sent to you in a recording through the email that you signed up with for the Lunch and Learn itself. So keep an eye out for that. If you look on our profile, you can find old Lunch and Learns. You can sign up for those, even though they've already been done, and you can get those recordings as well. But yeah, that's it for today, and I thank you all for joining me. Dashboard Studio Hub, it is on the web. I think it's on Splunk base as well, yes. But as always, thanks for joining me today, and I will look forward to seeing you all next month for our Lunch and Learn on the introduction to regex and how to use it in Splunk. Thank you again, everybody.